So you got that awesome new 3D printed engine, and you really want to take your model up a notch. But painting these things isn't easy, and you're afraid of losing detail or messing things up. Well, don't worry about it. Let me show you an easy way you can paint that little gem and really make it pop. I love painting model engines. When it comes to model airplanes, I rank this part of the build above finishing cockpits. And I love finishing those too, but for me, it's all about the engine. Which is why I've always been attracted to big, blunt radial engine airplanes. No matter what, when these engines are done up right, they certainly add a lot of interest to the plane. I picked up this 3D printed radial engine at the Heritage Con Model Show. My buddy, Tony Bell, designed this little 48 scale gem after a few drawings, a ton of photos he found online, and at least 80 hours of design effort. And this is a definite upgrade over the kit engine. And I can tell you with certainty, now that we have 3D prints of engines, I really see no reason to buy a resin aftermarket engine. Why? Well, unlike a resin engine, I don't have to hack it out of some nasty resin pouring block. Nope. No razor saws, no wearing masks, no resin dust here, just snip, 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 snippy, snippy, snip. Okay, I'll level with you. There were a lot of these supports to snip, and there is a little bit of cleanup with the scalpel, but there you have it. A nice clean part, and it's ready for painting. Here is a fairly standard example of the R2800 engine. Well, on pretty much every radial engine, the main color of the cylinders is aluminum. The housing has a grayish blue color, and the push rods are black. But make note of the color of the ignition ring and the ignition wires, as well as the magnetos, because these can be different colors. In this picture, we have a steel-coated ignition ring with silver-colored wiring. And in this picture, we have black magnetos and a black ignition ring. What I'm saying is that references are your friend, and there could be any number of variations. I'm going to go with this R2800, specifically the R2800 as it would have been used on Corsairs. Why? Well, I like the color of the ignition wires on this one. They stand out nicely. The painting process starts with a primer coat of Tamiya lacquer aluminum. Don't worry, I'll write down all of the paint numbers in the video description. Once I get that nice base color, I mask off the crankcase using Tamiya tape. Now, I wasn't sure how delicate the printed wiring would be, so I was very careful to keep the masking loose and I didn't push it down really hard. And I was also very careful when I was removing it so nothing would snap off. The crankcase, being that bluish gray or grayish blue, was painted with a mix of 4 parts Gunzy intermediate blue with 1 part Tamiya sky gray. Now, I've been asked about how I measure these things, and I use a pretty simple method along with 50-50 paint to thinner. I count out 20 drops of intermediate blue, and I count out 5 drops of sky gray. Now, you will develop your own method to see if the mix is right, but there is a quick way I check to see if it is. I lean the mix to the side and I see how the mix flows and I see how translucent it is. And you want to go for this thin for regular coverage. Any thicker or more opaque and it just won't spray right, and any thinner you just get runs. All this to say, this mix sprayed nicely. After removing the masking, I realized that I needed to paint the ignition ring the same color of the crankcase. Like I said, sometimes these are silver, but mine had to be that same gray blue, and this was done by hand using the same mix as the crankcase. Now I want to do some shadows. Again, I mix the paint, but instead of lightening up the blue, I'm going to mix 4 parts intermediate blue with 1 part Tamiya Nato black to darken it. I'm also going to thin the mix down 60-40 thinner to paint, and I'm going to dial down the pressure of the airbrush. This will allow me to make some really nice thin lines right where I want them. And I'm spraying where we would see some shadows, so around the magnetos, at the top and at the base of the crankcase, as well as around that oil sump thing. And of course, I messed it up and I went a bit heavy around the top. But not to worry, I can erase the oopses with a single shot of the original mix. There you go. Nice. Now, onto the black bits at the top. These would be very difficult to mask, so I painted them carefully by hand using Vallejo black paint, and I dry brushed them with some Citadel gray color. As I was dry brushing these parts, I was amazed at the detail. I mean, check out the holes in the disc at the front. That's just awesome. I then used some Tamiya lacquer aluminum to paint to pick out the bolt heads at the base of the crankcase and at the nose. A bit of a time-consuming process, but it does make the engine pop. However, upon reflection, painting the nose bolts is a little best left to the end of the process because a lot of it was obliterated during the dry brush part, and it all had to be redone at the end. Speaking of dry brushing, I really lightened the blue with white, and I used, for the first time ever, a dry brush specific brush. So, was this dry brush all that in a big bag of au gratin potato chips? Well, I guess so. I mean, it did the job, but would I recommend you run out and get one of these right away? No, not yet. But tell you what, I'm going to test these a little more and I'll let you know. The dry brushing got me all those nice highlights, and I followed that up with a small brush to hit the bolts and the magnetos as well as the wires coming off of them. Next up were the push rods, which I'm painting with Vallejo black again, and I'm being very careful to stay on the rods, but even if I mess up here and there, all those oopses are going to be ultimately covered with other colors. And while I have the black paint out, I paint the visible part of the engine frame as well. The tops of R2800 cylinders had a very shiny, almost chrome-like look. Now, I tried to use my chrome paint pen, but I guess the paint dried out. Instead, I used a chrome Sharpie, which worked really nicely. Now, this stuff takes forever to dry, so be careful in handling the part or you'll end up with very shiny fingers. I then did up the ignition wires. Now, you do have a few colors to choose from here, but I went with that pale yellow look because I really like to see the wiring. And I came up with my own paint mix using Tamiya buff, flat white, and flat yellow. And I think it looks pretty close. I then placed an Anyz Anyz, ANYZ decal on the crankcase for the label. I might not know how to say it, but these decals are very nice. Now, to really make the engine come alive, I used 2 washes. I started with Tamiya's black Panaline wash because I don't think there's anything better for popping out detail on those cylinders. And it's so easy to apply. You just take a small amount on the brush, dab it on, capillary action takes care of the rest. I then used some MIG Ammo Pacific Blue Panaline wash around the details of the crankcase, but for some reason that part wasn't recorded, or I accidentally deleted it. But rest assured, the wash was applied around the nose and magnetos and the oil sump. I cleaned it up a little bit with a cotton bud, and after that, a flat coat to blend everything in. So, here's the final result. I ended up with a very detailed engine that was painted in a way to make all of that detail pop. And it didn't take me long to do it. Unfortunately, I don't have a Corsair in the works right now, but rest assured, this gem of an engine is going on the next Corsair that I work on. Well, until next time, keep building, keep taking risks, and keep having fun. Thanks for watching, everyone.